Hello and welcome back to DMCA Chess Academy. This is Ritesh Mathew. Today we're going to learn how to correctly play the Petroff defense. It's also called the Russian defense. And if black doesn't play accurately, he can be worse or lose heavy material and also lose the game eventually. So the way Petroff defense starts is the correct way to play is white plays e4 and black responds with e5. Now both e4 and e5 pawns are unguarded. Nobody is protecting them. So that's what we need to keep in mind. So white develops his knight and attacks black's e5 pawn first. Now here black has to think about how to defend this undefended pawn. So, but instead of defending the pawn by normally bringing his knight out or probably defending with the pawn, instead of defending the pawn, black is like, I don't care about the pawn. Since your e4 pawn is also not protected, I'm going to counterattack. So this is a classic theoretical line of the Petroff defense. Both of them are attacking each other's pawns, and it's like a mirror image. So here white captures the pawn first, and then instead of immediately capturing the pawn, black, what he can do is he has to first attack the knight, and then knight goes back, and now black captures the pawn, and here white develops his d4 pawn, d2 pawn to d4, so that the bishop can be brought out and developed, and then black also pushes the d6 pawn to d5, so his dark square bishop can also come out. And here white can continue with his normal development, bring out the bishop to d3, and black can continue with his development with knight to c6. So this is the classic Petroff defense theoretical line. However, I want us to see one more line which is okay for both black and white. The position will be fairly equal. So white opens with e4, black responds with e5. Knight attacks the pawn, and black knight also attacks the white pawn. Here knight captures, but black, instead of driving the knight away first in the first variation that we saw, and after that capturing the pawn, instead of that variation, black copies white and captures white's pawn. Now over here white can bring his queen out to d2, and then black also brings his queen out to d2. So what white is saying is, okay, I'm going to attack your knight which is not protected. So black, instead of saving the knight, says, okay, I'm also going to attack your knight which is also not protected. So both of them are attacking each other's knights. Now here white captures the black knight, and over here what happens is the queen is not protected right now from white side. So black can't just capture the knight because he will lose the queen otherwise if black captures the white knight. So instead of capturing the white knight with the queen, what black will do is black will attack it with the pawn. Now white cannot save his knight, obviously, because the queen is not protected. So if white tries to save the knight, he will lose the queen. So obviously white is already one piece up. He captured the black knight. So white is not going to risk his queen just to save the knight. So white is going to let go of the knight and continue with his normal development by pushing his pawn to d4. Now black can just capture the knight. So now it's equal and balanced, and then black can capture the pawn. White can capture the black pawn. So this is still okay, this variation. Another variation I want us to see is e4, e5. White attacks the black pawn, black attacks the white pawn. And here white captures the pawn, black also captures. And then obviously queen is attacking the knight, but black tries to save, black also attacks white's knight, and then white attacks the knight with his pawn, and black tries to defend his knight by pushing the pawn, because if black doesn't save his knight, and if pawn captures the knight, then white's knight is also hanging right now. So black can capture the white knight. So that's why black, instead of saving the knight, he tried to save it with the pawn so that he can eventually capture white knight. So here white captures black knight, black captures white's knight, and here white can capture the pawn, but black cannot capture the pawn right now because queen is pinned to the king. So this queen cannot move right now. So in this particular variation, what black can do is black can just capture the queen, and white will recapture it back. So here white is slightly better because he has an extra pawn here. So white is a little better in this variation. So black shouldn't play this particular variation. But here comes the final disaster. This is where black is really going to lose the game if he falls for this kind of trap. So e4, e5, white attacks the pawn, black attacks white pawn, white captures, black captures, queen attacks the black knight, and here black makes a big mistake of trying to save the knight. Now what happens is, before the knight goes away, there are only two knights in between the a discovered check. So white can give a discovered check to the king, and only two knights are in the way. So if black voluntarily removes the knight out of the way, now we only have one knight, and there's going to be a discovered check now. So the rule of discovered check is whatever is in between the check, whatever piece is in between the check, we can put that piece and cause the maximum damage to our opponent. So what we can do, what white can do here is put his knight to the c6 square. So what happened is, first of all he gave a discovered check to black. So that's threat number one. And threat number two now is there is an attack on the queen also. So black obviously has to deal with threat number one, which is bring his king out of check. But he doesn't have time to save the queen now, which is the threat number two. So here black is going to lose the queen. Now normally what a person can do is he can take care of threat number two also by moving that queen and blocking the check. So he can make an attempt to save the queen like that. However, the bad news in the Petroff defense is the knight is controlling both the squares over here. Our knight is controlling both these squares. So even if queen tries to save herself and block the check at the same time, it's still the same story. If queen blocks, then black is still going to lose the queen. So this is a big disaster that black needs to be careful about when he's playing the Petroff defense. A lot of my own students in my academy, they love to play the Petroff defense, so they'll have to be careful on which variation they play and how they play. If they just do a copycat in the Petroff defense, then they'll have to be careful of this particular trap. So I hope you like this trap, and please like and subscribe for more chess and music related videos. Thank you so much for watching.